Are you passionate about foreign policy, national security, and the latest in domestic politics? Consider becoming a member of the DSR Network, your go-to source for in-depth analysis and insightful discussions. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code GRADUATE to receive 30% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code GRADUATE. Thank you very much for your support.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. This week brought us a host of new insights into the relationship between Donald Trump and Republicans on Capitol Hill. Here's the upshot of what we learned. Wow, this is much crazier and more dangerous than you thought. First, Politico reported that Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson privately schemed over how to use the House to sabotage ongoing prosecutions of Trump. Then, on Thursday, Trump met behind closed doors with Republicans on the Hill, and he reportedly unleashed all kinds of strange rants, calling the Justice Department dirty bastards to no GOP criticism that I saw. He also described Milwaukee, where the GOP will hold its convention, as a horrible city, and the GOP, of course, rushed to his defense. Republican capitulation to Trump appears close to absolute. Today we're trying to make sense of all this with A.B. Stoddard, a veteran journalist at The Bulwark and a very shrewd observer of Republican politics. Great to have you back on, A.B.
Happy to be with you, Greg.
So it's hard to know where to start, but let's begin here. Politico reports that Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson privately talked about how the House GOP can derail these prosecutions of Trump. Some of the ideas include a bill empowering presidents to transfer state prosecutions of themselves to federal courts, and a host of proposals targeting special counsel Jack Smith are out there swirling around, including restricting funds for prosecutions of presidents and ex-presidents. Hint, hint, ex-presidents. I mean, the Republican Party collectively seems singularly focused on doing all they can to prevent the law from being applied to Trump, don't they?
It's amazing. I heard Eric Swalwell, a congressman from California, who's an able orator, talking today about this. The Republican leadership they're like running a law firm. You know, Mike Johnson's running a law firm. He has one client, but he has to put all his man hours and a lot of resources into this client. The reporting from Politico actually, Greg, showed that Trump thought, like, he called Mike Johnson and was after his felony conviction and was dropping F-bombs and wanted to overturn the conviction. Sometimes I wonder if Trump knows how these things work. But yes, he's doing everything he can to use the Republican leadership in the House and the conference to, as you just detailed, try to mitigate his prosecutions and intimidate people in the future, right? It's really all about the chill that he's sending out and his complicit Republicans are sending out to law enforcement, to judges, to juries, right across the board. It's a widespread effort, universal effort in the Republican Party now to denigrate the rule of law. And so I mean, today was remarkable. They basically billed it in advance as him coming up to talk about the agenda. You know, they have an agenda,
yeah, right?
They're focused on policy, not grievances, not a cult, not retribution, and not just obtaining power through their minority. It's a serious policy agenda. So of course he comes up and he can't stay on policy because he's disinterested in policy, except he rails on abortion, which must have been music to Mike Johnson's ears, right? Because he is a devout Christian who really believes this stuff, truly, authentically, and genuinely. And Trump doesn't. Trump sees abortion as a loser issue. So that's the only policy he discussed. The rest of it was this sicko stream of consciousness stuff that he does that's so disturbing. And then they had to come out and pretend that it was great, and they were focused on what they were going to do for the American people once they obtained the White House again and were returned to the majority and won the Senate. So it's pathetic. Johnson had to come out and say things like, we were energized and excited, and it was enthusiastic, and just go on and on. But I love that the Republicans were reporting out live from these gatherings the crap that Trump was saying, because we learned this from Republicans, right? We didn't learn it from Democrats or the media in these meetings. His own Republicans were basically revealing how unhinged he was.
But you know what, though, AB? The Republicans, even though it was coming from them, as soon as Jake Sherman reported the Milwaukee comment, I think I saw at least one Republican pound on him, calling him a Democratic shill, when he was just reporting what Republicans were telling him.
I think that I saw on Twitter that they've come up officially with like 4 different explanations of why he said it and why it was okay to say it. And we're all putting it out of context and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
The funny thing about that is that it is absolutely a tenet of MAGA and really a long-time Republican trope, honestly, although I think it has been supercharged with racism under MAGA and so forth. But it has been a long-time tenet of conservative politics and Republican politics and now MAGA politics that cities are just cesspools. You know, they're inherently shitholes, right? Because they are where Democrats and cosmopolitans live.
I know, and I just desperately hope that these people who are putting up billboards across the country get one up in Milwaukee as soon as possible about what he said.
Well, there's a nuance here I want to bring up with you. Interestingly, a number of House Republicans in tough races appear resistant to voting for some of these proposals to protect Trump, and it's unclear whether they'll pass. Similarly, House Republicans struggled to get the votes earlier this week for a measure holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress based on a bogus demand that the Justice Department release audio of President Biden's testimony regarding his handling of classified documents. Everyone knows this is a Republican scam. Republicans just want that audio as a political weapon. But that aside, right, we're in a situation where Republicans themselves know that having their marginal members side with Trump against the rule of law is politically terrible for them, yet they're still publicly all in with him.
Greg, I think they're learning from Trump. The priority, right, is Trump. The priority's never been a Republican majority. He doesn't care if the Republicans have a majority in the Senate because he doesn't legislate. He refuses to compromise. It's why he never passed an immigration bill when they had control, because he doesn't want to give ground. And so he wants to do everything in an authoritarian way, all through the executive branch. And so he's never cared if Republicans have power on the minority, the majority, whatever. He's going to screw it up anyway. And he wants to do what he wants to do from the White House. So they've known for a long time he's not looking out for their majorities. He's not looking out for frontliners. And it's pathetic that Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise are going to give in and put him before their frontliners, but they want to please him actually more than they even want a majority.
It's funny because some of these frontliners are actually really trying to avoid commenting on Trump's criminal conviction in Manhattan.
Well, I don't think they can escape it. And in the end, they know that he's keeping score, and if they say anything to put distance, they're really gonna pay. So, it's not fun to be a Republican in a battleground. Oh, well.
Yeah, right. I do think part of this appearance on Capitol Hill by Trump was itself kind of an act of an enforcer, right? Yeah. He's really sending the message to the world that the Republican Party is fully with him, despite his criminal convictions and ongoing criminal prosecutions, or maybe because of them. But that's really the message that Trump is sending, right? That the Republican Party is united behind him in spite of his crimes.
Yeah, and that's why Mitch McConnell, who hasn't talked to the man in almost, in 4 years or more, and hasn't seen him, had to go to the meeting and then come out and say, we shook hands several times. It was so great. There were several standing ovations. Now is the time. I mean, as you said, this was a test of might, right? This was a show of force. This was designed to bring everyone to heel and to show the donors and anyone, any voices of dissent, quietly in the corners of the party, that it's over, Larry Hogan or whoever, that it's over, that he has control over everybody and that they're, quote, united. And so, it's effective, right? They all come out and say it was the best thing ever. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene's practically weeping, even though he called her out essentially he basically told her to stop picking on Speaker Johnson because he has his back. She had to come out and save her reputation by saying it was just a joke, but he was so sweet to her. It's really, the hold he has is not in doubt. It's overwhelming, and there's no room for any more dissent. And that's why you like I said, you even had to have McConnell come out and be so enthusiastic, which is really, really hard to see.
Yeah, well, it was really an extraordinary act of capitulation. I want to say something about Marjorie Taylor Greene for a sec. I happened to actually watch the video of her talking to a CNN reporter about having had the attention of Trump shine on her for a few seconds. And as you said, she was practically weepy, but she was also like almost weirdly transfixed, right? The cult leader had given her attention, and there was something so weird, so deeply, profoundly disturbing about how transported she was by that moment. I didn't know what to think.
It is worth watching for those who might be interested and can stomach it. I saw it too. It is super creepy.
Creepy, yeah, that's the word I wanted. Okay, so you have Trump ranting to Republicans as well that the DOJ are dirty bastards, right? Which means that he fully expects Republicans to deliver results in shielding him from them. That's alarming by itself, that he would just rant that a major federal law enforcement agency is, he would just curse in the most disgusting way possible about them. And Republicans would, I guess maybe that was one of the things they gave a standing ovation for. I don't know. But here's my question for you. Doesn't this get worse for Republicans? Trump expects them to deliver. So they're going to have to vote on some of these things, potentially like defunding Smith's office or something, right?
Right. So, Greg, I think it's a two-front problem for them. A, the bills that you listed, the initiatives they're going to try to push through to give him like deliverables, wins in the Congress to push back against his prosecutions. That's one area. They're going to have to defend them. They're going to have to support them. And they're going to have to take that in their campaign. But then he's becoming increasingly unhinged in his rhetoric. He calls it the Department of Injustice. They have to continue to defend all of this. So, I'm of the mind, if he brings up Hannibal Lecter a couple of weeks ago at a rally, like Biden brings up corn pop, you forgive a little zany old man crap here and there. But when he brings up Hannibal Lecter again today at a closed-door meeting of congressional Republicans, I'm sorry, it's just weird. He lied about Pelosi. His daughters called it out on the internet later this afternoon. All of this, to me, is illustrative of the fact that Trump is becoming more emboldened. He's more confident he's going to win. And his crazy talk is getting worse. And it is going to be harder, not only like you mentioned, to defend these actual efforts in the Congress, not just hearings, but things they want to pass on the floor, but then to defend what he's saying, in these weird radio interviews he does and at these rallies where he sounds increasingly whacked out. Now, let's step back. Joe Biden always sounds tired. Sometimes he closes his eyes like old men do to hear what people are saying. He has a far off look in his eye. he can trail off, his voice can go to a whisper, but he doesn't actually say things like Nancy Pelosi's daughter told me that we in another life, like would have in another situation would have been in a romance. Like this is a mental patient talking. And I'm looking forward to all these Republicans having to defend whatever he wants to continue saying in the months to come.
Right. You're referring to the reporting today, which indicated that in this meeting with Republicans, Trump called Nancy Pelosi's daughter a wacko, and then said she once told him that he and Pelosi would have had a, quote, great romance in a different life or something like that. This is alarmingly crazy stuff. Biden raises understandable worries among the electorate about his mental stamina and so forth. But still, how is it possible, given something like this about Nancy Pelosi, given the Hannibal Lecter lunacy, how is it possible that we keep hearing this kind of stuff, yet Biden's mental fitness for the presidency is the thing we're discussing and not Trump's? How is that possible?
There's such an asymmetry and such a double standard. It makes me crazy because I actually don't think that Biden is mentally deteriorating. I think he's really tired. And so it's harder for him to have the vigor in his rhetoric the way that we expect from presidents. Like every time we hear them talk, we expect them to be like, high energy. So it is worrisome. People think that he just really shouldn't do the job anymore, right? Trump said that Nikki Haley was in charge of security on January 6th instead of Nancy Pelosi. And we just moved on, right? There's just, the Republicans don't care and the media doesn't dog to the bone with it. They just move past it. And so there's this double standard where Trump is like this wacky entertainer and he's kind of kooky and fun and he does his stick at the rallies. But then anything Biden like slips up on, or if he's talking too softly, it's like, oh my God, he's going to die before he gets back to Air Force One. And I just think it's a double standard.
Yeah, there's no question. And it's important what you just said there about how we all sort of treat it as wacky and fun. I think today's reporting, the stuff about scheming with Mike Johnson on how to keep himself above the law and corrupt the House of Representatives as a weapon toward that end. This is not a drill. This is not a joke, this stuff. This guy should not be president.
No. And there's so much about it that is disturbing. I think, though, the only thing that is changing is the fact that he's going to be more visible, is that he's out of the trial. He's going to have to, when he's not golfing, actually campaign. He is emboldened and saying too much weird stuff. And I think it actually is going to make the Democrats' job a little bit easier. I do. I think it'll be hard for Mike Lawler in New York to be asked about this stuff at home. It's not going to be fun. He's uncorked more than ever because he sees the polls and he absolutely believes he's already won.
Yes, I think that's really important, AB. He thinks that he's winning while pushing not only this sort of crazy, ranting lunatic stuff about, just some topic he pulls out of the air, but also while he's making overt authoritarian threats of all kinds, right? Such as openly threatening to prosecute his opponents without cause, talking about how migrants are poisoning the blood of the country. He thinks he's winning while saying that stuff and while threatening an overt authoritarian presidency. And so I think he will double down on that as well as the kind of crazy stuff we call wacky or whatever, right?
As well as Hannibal Lecter. I agree with you, Greg. So it's like he tells Time Magazine that was 6 weeks ago. He tells Time Magazine, they say, don't you think, can't you see why Americans would be turned off by you, saying you want to be dictator for a day? And he said, I think a lot of them like it. And so, as you say, as he campaigns on running an autocracy and he thinks that the Americans are warming to it, he'll be more confident and more explicit and more off the cork about it because he thinks that it is becoming increasingly popular. Now, it is among his base and his cult. However, the challenge to the Biden campaign, not a lot of people know about Project 2025. They don't know that there's going to be military in the streets to quash, protests when he invokes the Insurrection Act on day 2 after being inaugurated. I mean, he's making explicit plans most Americans don't know about it. So the challenge to the Biden campaign is to try to make sure, and I think that's an online battle, right? It's like they're not going to really talk about that behind podiums, but to really make sure that on TikTok and in certain places, they're fighting that information battle and they're trying to educate Americans about his authoritarian plans. I know it won't be as digestible as abortion, but I still think it's really important that they do what they can to at least drag in, to educate enough people and alarm enough people that it would make a difference on the margins.
AB, can I ask you on that score, do Democrats and the Biden campaign know that that's the fight?
Oh, yeah. No, they do. They ran on democracy in 2022 in the midterms. And they were rewarding in the sense that obviously we had the energy of Dobbs. And so abortion really helps Democrats stave off a terrible midterm. Republicans still do well in a lot of places. Republicans vote more than Democrats. They just vote many times for Democrats. So we see election deniers win in these critical races, gubernatorial races, Secretary of State races. So the Biden administration's like, wow, people got it, right? We ran on democracy and they got it. Really? Do we not know it was an abortion? So there's a lot of, people, I think the party is tends to sort of put more of the focus on abortion because it's so digestible and it's so tangible to people. And I think there's a lot of people in the party who say, stop talking about democracy. These people are trying to pay their bills. Eggs cost too much. They can't go to the gas pump, blah, blah, blah. You're talking down to them about inflation, how the economy is so great. And they don't want to hear about democracy. So there is a struggle about the primacy of that issue in the campaign, even though they know it's so important. They know that's the ballgame of this entire election is we're going to have to elect an old man who's going to be 82 to make sure that we keep the system of self-governance that we have and that we maintain the constitutional order. That's it. It's binary. And so they all know that. I just think they have trouble, like really, right, sort of tactically blocking and tackling on this issue when they think healthcare and abortion and prescription drugs, those types of things are much more, I don't know, compelling to voters.
Right. But it's your sense that they recognize that they're in an information war about the autocratic threat, that they have to get in there to those TikTok spaces and make it clear what Trump is actually saying to his base.
I really hope so, Greg. I like to say this, Biden's reelect will be won or lost online. It will not be won with him on a stage talking to people in Wisconsin, trying to get swing voters to support him. There is so much misinformation coming from the right and from the Trump campaign. And they've got to up their game and make sure that they're micro-targeting and they're all those places. Trump is already dominating on TikTok. It's a big worry. But in terms of their erosion with non-college voters, white, Latino, and Hispanic, that all non-college voters, they have to be reaching with targeted messages. And that's going to be online, has to be very sophisticated. My goodness, if you look back, Greg, to the 2020 election, think how much information consumption has even changed since then. We're dealing with a different electorate, so they have to be really shrewd about this.
Well, I will say that I think that there are some seeds of optimism in this discussion, if I'm detecting them, right? What he did today, what he's been saying to Mike Johnson, these are, like I said, not a drill. This is appallingly crazy stuff, really revealing him to be utterly unfit for the presidency. But at the same time, we think that he's developing a bit of hubris along the way. He's kind of, he's drinking the Kool-Aid of Republican polling. He's got people like Stephen Miller out there saying authoritarianism is winning, right? Steve Bannon is saying authoritarian messaging is winning. So, right? And they really want that message out there because they are fully intent on having an authoritarian second Trump term. And they want it understood that they told the American people that that's what they're going to get, and they voted for Trump anyway. In the end, we can see kind of reason for cautious optimism in all this in the hubris, right?
I agree with you. I think he's going to overstep, and I think it'll be hard for Republicans who can't turn back now to defend it. I also want to point to something else, which actually did give me hope for the first time in a long time, which is the post-verdict polls. And in them, I see the makings of a potential majority of Americans to see the majorities and pluralities in these polls where people say the verdict was correctly decided. He was treated like any other defendant. He wasn't persecuted. 64% of Americans in the Yahoo YouGov poll saying we think that all of the rest of his cases need to be brought to trial before the election. What that tells me is that they had their faith in the system reaffirmed by a jury. And that just any group of non-engaged, kind of low information voters, persuadables, not tribal, not partisan, having that response to that trial is a real indication to me that they support the rule of law and that they thought that it worked. And I thought that was heartening.
I'm so glad you said that. I really think that stuff is those polling numbers are really a big deal too. And I just want to add that the American people majorities really concluded both that Trump was rightly convicted of crimes, but also that the system treated him fairly. They concluded this in the face of an absolute roar of authoritarian propaganda to the contrary. Just to loop back to the Republican Party, the entire party got behind the message that this was all an illegitimate sham. And yet the American people, essentially took the right message from what happened. AB, it's always good to have you on. Thank you so much, really.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Folks, make sure to check out some great new content up at TNR.com. Tom Hartman explaining why Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos want women to stay barefoot and pregnant, and Matt Ford on the Supreme Court's new abortion decision and why it's so important. We'll see you all Monday. You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler on the DSR Network.